G'day everyone, welcome back to another episode of Got the 4 Points. Pete and Rob with you, your local footy show. We have been enjoying a bit of crisp weather here. Pretty cold down in Melbourne. If you're watching on the YouTube, you'll see I'm kitted out in beanie and several jumpers. Must be pretty warm where you are, Pistol.
Yeah, it's not bad inside with the heater going full bore as it has been for most of the day. So, hence why I'm joining in just the Uni Blacks Indigenous jumper. But yeah, it's been pretty chilly weekend for football, which we can attest to being out in some of that chilly weather yesterday.
Yeah, but boy, it's good to have proper wet weather footy back. It wasn't like it was raining yesterday, but there's enough mud on the ground just to make it feel like it's proper winter football now. We're loving that. We're certainly up and about, the two of us. We don't want to mention the Uni Blacks too much, but geez, we've had a couple of good wins, and we hope that out there in footy universe, your teams are also getting the 4 points. But we're pretty happy with our boys getting the 4 points lately. Just quietly knocked off the ladder leaders, Old Brighton, yesterday by 3 points, which was, I reckon, a result that quite a bit of the VAFA will be sitting up and taking notice of. But we got on the show today a bit of a roundup of some of the other stuff that's caught our eye. We're going to go around, maybe try and touch on a few leagues we haven't talked too much about at various stages, as well as some of our absolute favourites. And a reminder that we've got both YouTube and Spotify happening. And if you've got a tip for us, if you've got something you'd like us to cover or know about, we've got a couple of tips that have been coming in. Thank you very much to our email and to our Instagram. So we're at Got the 4 Points on Instagram, YouTube, and Spotify. Pete, do you want to tell me a bit about some of the stuff that has been catching your eye?
Yeah, definitely. And look, the first thing I will note is we do have a episode coming up soon of the VAFA mid-season review. Hasn't been released yet, but as some will remember, we did pre-season reviews of a number of leagues, and now we're starting to work through a few mid-season reviews. And I reckon in that mid-season review, not to give too much away of the episode, because we do encourage you to go check that out when it's released, but I reckon we might have had a little discussion of does old Brighton lose a game this season in Premier A, and I can't remember what you answered now, um, but
I can.
um, but they have lost one, so it was an incredible day for us. But I'm going to stick with the VAFA to start things off, Rob, and we've also spoken a little bit around the Monash Blues. Now, the Monash Blues are a team that have done the double drop. So VAFA promotion relegation system. So Monash Blues in Prem B relegated to Prem C, and then from Prem C last season relegated straight away to Div 1. And about 3 weeks ago, it was looking pretty dire. Monash hadn't won a game. It was looking like a triple drop was potentially on the cards, and Div 2 footy was ahead of them. Now, I'm not saying that they're out of the woods on that. They had strung 2 wins in a row together against bottom sides in Div 1. And you sort of went, okay, at least they're in with a shout of staying away from relegation because they can at least beat those that are below them. But you never feel confident when you're only just sitting above the drop. Well, they absolutely stormed home on the weekend to beat Oakley. Oakley are sitting around mid-table, so definitely a good win to pick up. They defeated them by the solitary goal, 6 points, 62 to 68. When I did check out the score a little bit further, though, it was incredible to me that Monash were 23 points down heading into the final quarter. So they are a really, really young team, Monash. There was definitely an article in the paper maybe a week or so ago with the Monash coach talking a little bit around just the I suppose, encouragement he's getting from seeing these young guys start to find some belief, start to string some really good footy together, and actually have a feeling like they can go places. And it just feels like maybe it's starting to happen. So That's three on the trot for Monash. I really hope this is a sign of good things to come for them moving forward. And that's certainly exciting. And whilst looking through the VAFA scores on the weekend in a similar vein in Prem B, Williamstown CYMS were 22 points down heading into the last quarter against Old Camberwell and got over the top of them there at their home deck. And I think there's, as you and I now know, having been involved in one this season and quite a incredible one for the Blacks, I reckon this can't be any better feeling than on your home deck. The crowd's up and about, things are building, and you're just turning this big deficit over from the last quarter to win the game. So yeah, those were a couple of things that caught my eyes initially there in the VAFA.
Awesome. That's a great way to start. I did see that old Camberwell result too. We're gonna get to the Premier B situation in a little more depth at the end, Pete, when we get to Paddock to Premiership. But old Camberwell have dropped to third bottom. Not been a good run for them lately. So letting that one slip against Williamstown. Well, it'll be interesting to see whether that comes back to bite them. But no, good start there on the summaries. I'm going to take you away from the VAFA, Pete, to one of your favorite areas of the state. I know you do a lot of traveling in the car. You get to see a lot of beautiful places. I do remember one time when I got to do a bit of driving up into northeast Victoria. I stayed at a little place called Buchan, and I did note at the time I had a little wander around the footy club room or the footy oval and around the outside of the club rooms as I often do. And I noted that Buchan are called the cavemen. And I just love it. It's one of the greatest nicknames in all of footy. It's one of the most beautiful football grounds in all of local football, I reckon. And so I always, when I get a chance, check out their scores and see how they are doing. Hasn't been the greatest year so far up there in the Omeo District League, very small league. But Pete, they did have an absolute classic win on the weekend by 2 points over Brisbane. 10-13-73 to 11-5-71. Buchan would have been kicking themselves if they lost that game, having kicked 10 goals 13 to 11 goals 5,
Mm,
having kicked so much more inaccurately, but they did get the win. And it was a pretty impressive game, Pete. So they jumped out with a very good 5 goal first quarter, Buchan. And then they were holding on 8-6-54 to three straight 18 at half time. Brisbane have come out in the third quarter and blitzed it. I don't know whether there was a strong wind
mm,
going to that initial end that Buchan were kicking to, but Brisbane have kicked 7 goals to zip in the third quarter,
mm,
hit the front at three-quarter time by 5 points. Must have been an epic last quarter, Pete. 2 goals to 1 in favour of Buchan,
mm,
and they've got the job done in the end by 2 points. So, speaking of being up and about with the crowd, I reckon getting a 2 point win over your local rivals, and let's be honest, all the communities are pretty close and pretty rivalry-esque up there in that part of the world. So that would have been an absolute ripper. I just love looking into this league. What I found really fascinating, I mean, there's only 6 teams in this league, Pete. And so every team is quite close. I noticed that Lindenau South are on the bottom of the ladder, have a winless currently, but they won the flag only a couple of years ago. So
mm,
this is a league where I guess it's small and there's lots of recycling of teams having their time. Brisbane would have gone into this game, Pete, with 20 points on the board, 5 wins, and a percentage of 253.4 against the fourth place Buchan, who'd only won 3 games and a percentage of 85, thinking that they had a real shot, Brisbane. They
mm.
would have probably been banking this win if I'm looking at that outline before the game, and yet Buchan have managed to get the 3 point win. So pretty fascinating in that small league to have such a win for a side with initially three less victories and 180 odd percent difference
Yeah,
going into the game. So I thought that was a pretty fascinating one and definitely caught my eye from up there in the northeast.
definitely. Yeah, that's a good one. One of the things that I really find interesting about that league and I'd be really interested to know how they navigate it as clubs. But from a football sense, there are two divisions, and it's under 16s and
Hmm.
then it's seniors. So I'm
Yeah.
really interested to understand what happens in between that, what happens from 12 to that sort of 14 age bracket, and then what happens when you're 17 years old and you're having to go play football against grown men. So I'm really intrigued in that league what they do to navigate that, and maybe that's why we see a little bit more of a recycle of
Mm.
teams and where they're finishing, because there at times can be such large gaps in the development of players. But and then the other thing is, and I'm sure I may have mentioned this story before, if we've when we've discussed the Omeo League, but I was up in the great Omeo, and I was walking around one of their ovals, and I got swooped by magpies, which was a lovely welcome to the Omeo Oval there, which was a really nice setup. Outside of the fact that I had to hit the deck a number of times to, protect the head. It's all about protecting the head. And I really feel like the umpires didn't give me a great shout that day because the Maggies kept going for me and didn't even get carded, unfortunately. Um,
I still remember getting swooped by plovers playing footy in Castlemaine. Like magpies are nasty, but plovers have poison spurs on their wings
yeah,
and they make a god awful noise. So yeah, look, magpies, plovers.
yeah,
With the plovers nest on the field, which is not a great move by them. They should structure their nesting around football season, clearly. But yeah, I just remember the plovers being terrifying.
yeah. Oh, I mean, I've also been swooped by plovers. This is turning into a bird episode, but it was at probably maybe the same place you got swooped by
Wesley
plovers,
Hill.
which was Wesley Hill Recreation Reserve, and well, I mean, I made the fatal mistake of, you and I both did high schooling in Maryborough. So, of course, having to catch the bus back from Maryborough to Castlemaine meant at times I would often be 5 to 10 minutes late for footy training for Winters Flat Junior Football Club, which meant running the lap by myself. And the problem was is that the plovers normally wouldn't go at the full group because it was a full group. They'd normally leave the full group alone.
Mhm.
But when it's an individual target, it is a lot easier. And
Yeah.
once again, I had to hit the decker a number of times running around the Wesley Hill Recreation Reserve. But anyway, we're not here to talk birds. I'm sure that might be our only bird reference, or it might not be, because there's plenty of footy clubs that have a bird mascots and nicknames for their club. But I'm going to stick around that Gippsland area, Rob, and I'm going to talk around Bunyip. So Bunyip have secured their first win since rejoining the Allenbank District League. They beat Poowong by 21 points. So they were, as you might remember, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was the West Gippsland Football League, which disbanded. I don't know. There's been a lot of changes in that
Yeah, it's been
Gippsland area
fun.
because there's also the Mid Gippsland League and all of those. But there's been a lot of change in that area. But really, really good for Bunyip. I think off the top of my head, I don't have the number exactly in front of me. I think it was breaking around a 23 game losing streak for Bunyip, which is incredible. We've spoken a lot around different clubs having broken their losing streaks. And it's certainly something that caught my eye as I was perusing through all of the different results. So, yeah, Bunyip getting the win there. And yeah, hopefully it's a sign of things to come for them moving forward in the season.
Yeah, no, that's great. We love seeing a losing streak broken. So that's really good for Bunyip. Yep, it was the West Gippsland League. That's right, that they came from. Yeah. All right. So we love broken losing streaks. And Pete, we also love a draw. And we have had at least two on the weekend. Let us know if there's another one that we've missed. But I saw two of them pop up in my feed. I want to take you briefly back to the VAFA for a second because this was an absolute classic. The Uni Blues have drawn with St Bernard's, 7-12-54 apiece. It was a pretty low scoring day across the VAFA A grade, Pete, but that one, 7 goals, 12, especially low scoring and inaccurate, when the wind gets up down there at the Snake Pit, it's a bit of a wind tunnel and must have been pretty difficult conditions. I
Mm.
did see that one of the Uni Blues players kicked an absolute classic, one of those dribblers around the corner late in the last quarter, but it wasn't enough to get the W. The context to this is that St. Bernard's beat the Uni Blues in round one by 1 point with a kick after the siren. So I think it's fair to say these two sides are pretty well matched in 2025. Um, Uni Blues are going to feel pretty hard done by in some ways. They haven't managed to get a win over St Bernard's, and yet the aggregate losing margin is 1 point across the two games. So anyway, that's an absolute classic. I just want to note James Stewart continued his hot goal kicking form. He kicked 4 goals, up to 26 for the season there in the VAFA A grade. So a classic from the Snake Pit, and also a classic in the Mornington Peninsula Football Netball League, Pete. Edithvale Aspendale versus Mornington Bulldogs was locked at the end at 13 or 11-13-79 apiece. Eddie Asp, that's how they seem to be described. Eddie Asp, I don't know how you say it. Magpies. They raised a 14-point deficit fairly late in that last quarter. They went on to force the draw. I think Edithvale Aspendale would have gone into that game as favourites. They did have some big names, Chris Pendlebury and Ty Vickery, not playing, but that was an absolute classic down there in the Mornington Peninsula District Football Netball League. Great to see a couple of draws.
Yeah, that's really good. That's some good stuff there. Yeah, Uni Blues just yeah, that's probably two games against St. Bernard's that they're probably going a kick here. That it could have been very different, and they could have won both and had 8 points, and that could have the ladder looking very different in the VAFA
Yeah.
currently. So that is certainly some interesting elements there, and
Well,
it does
it's fair to say the two uni teams are the masters of close games in recent weeks. Uh,
most definitely, yeah.
thankfully for us, thankfully for us, the Uni Blacks have been on the right side of the ledger,
Mm.
and the Blues have been, unfortunately for them, on the wrong side of quite a few of those close games this year.
Yeah, they've just really seemed to struggle to close games out this year, the Blues.
Mm.
It feels like they've been close to beating just about every team in the comp,
Yeah,
and they somehow managed to find a way to lose every single one of them nearly. So
yeah, such
I'm
a pity.
sure for them I'm sure for them it's got to be encouraging that they're getting themselves into those positions, but clearly they need to finish better. And I'm just going to ignore the drive by. But I'm going to take us, Rob. We talk about this league all the time. I know people probably get sick of it, but it is just such a good league. We are talking Ovens and Murray again. It caught my eye because whatever they are doing in that league to have sustainability and competitiveness across the competition is incredible. So I'm just going to read out some results. I don't have an in-depth analysis of every single game here. I just wanted to read out because that's what caught my eye was the closeness of the five results that were played. It might be six actually. No, five. I was right initially, but the Wangaratta Rovers had a 5 point win over the Wodonga Bulldogs. So nice close game under a kick. The Hoppers, my boys, North Albury, a 9 point win over Myrtleford. So two goals.
Myrtleford have
Lavington,
been in hot form too.
they have been. They've
Yeah,
certainly been in hot form and they've knocked off some of the other high ranking teams. Lavington, which is another team that's been causing a few upsets and knocking a few higher rated teams off, with a 26 point win over Corowa. So, if you think, what 2 years ago, Corowa weren't even playing because they were in recess. A
yeah,
tough year last year trying to rebuild back, and then in season two, back from recess, 26 point loss. I'm sure, I'm sure they'd love to get some wins on the board, but But I also think, 26-point loss is a hell of a lot closer than a 260-point loss, which we're seeing in
Mm.
some other leagues with teams struggling. The Pigeons, just to get with the bird theme again. So Yarrawonga had a 23-point win over the Wodonga Raiders. And then the big upset. So whilst this was the highest margin, it was also probably not an expected margin, was Albury beating the Wangaratta Magpies by 6 goals. So a really, really intriguing result there from the Tigers. But I just think, 36, 23, 26, 9, and 5 point, margins across all games. That's a sign to me that the league is in a really healthy position from a Ovens and Murray perspective. I don't know. We might need to try and find someone from the Ovens and Murray who we can chat to and actually talk a little bit around some of this and see, are there things that they are doing differently to other leagues that are putting them in this position? And what are they seeing that's providing them with some real strength? Or, maybe this is just the outside looking in. Maybe they're
Mm.
inside the glass looking out, going, things are good, but it could be better. I don't know. It'd be interesting to know, but just another really strong weekend of close results, upsets, and I think as we've said in previous episodes, it's hard to know where this Ovens and Murray season goes in terms of who's winning it. And I think that's the joy, or who's making finals. I think that's the joy
Yeah.
of. I think that's the joy of this league this season compared to some others that we're seeing. So full credit to them there at Ovens and Murray.
Yeah, I agree, Pete. Good summary. I've started to notice as we're looking around lots of these different leagues doing these shows, how interesting the percentage column is, you
Mm,
know? And I do notice, I'm just having a little look at the O&M ladder. I can see Wodonga Raiders are on the bottom without a win. So there is still a winless team.
yep.
So it's not blemish free, I guess, in terms of competitiveness. But as you say, if you look across the board, very, very competitive. But I noticed that Wangaratta Rovers are on top and they did lose this weekend, I think you said there.
No, Wang Rovers won by 5 points. It was the
Oh, five
Magpies that
points.
went
Sorry.
down.
Okay, very, very close win then. But the top team has a percentage of 146. If you compare that to the percentage of the top team in most other country football leagues, I would suggest to you that might be one of the lowest percentages. And it'd be interesting to know, but just
Mm,
from what I've seen of top teams, I reckon that would be one of the lowest percentages. And I think that is probably a sign of the competitiveness of the league.
yeah,
That team, even though they're on top, they've lost 2 games and they're not winning every game, or when they do win, they're not winning by such enormous margins that their percentage is up over 200. So,
yeah.
yeah,
six six of the 10 teams all have a percentage over 100,
yeah,
which shows
yeah,
it's pretty even. Albury are the seventh team on 92, Yarrawonga on 74, Corowa on 78. Wodonga Raiders struggling a bit on 43. But again, compared to some other leagues where your bottom of the ladder as well is on, 5 to 10%,
yeah,
it's certainly showing that. And, the Wodonga Raiders went down to Yarrawonga by only 23 points.
yeah,
So they're also showing within that they also have the ability to get close as well. So yeah, that's a really good pickup. Maybe it's something we can keep our eye on as we start looking through more results. But yeah, could that be? I'm still on the hunt from what we said a few episodes ago. I've yet to have found a senior league where every team has had a win
mm,
and every team has had a loss. So I'm yet to find a league like that. I thought I had one the other. Everyone had a loss. I thought, here we go, but unfortunately, one of the teams hadn't quite had a win. This Ovens and Murray one is probably a close one as well. Just the Wodonga Raiders not having a win is the only thing stopping them
mm.
from being in that column. And yeah, I'm still on the hunt for a league where that is true. So maybe we just need more people scouring Play HQ and let us
Yeah.
know. Let us know if you can find a league where that's true, and let us know if you can find a league where the top of the ladder has a percentage lower than 146.
Yep, good call. We'll be scouting that too during the week. I'm going to take you to what I think, from my perusal, is the closest rival, perhaps, Pete, to competitiveness in
Yep.
local footy, at least one of them. Um, I want to draw your attention to the Hampton Football League down in southwestern Victoria.
Hmm.
Um, it's going pretty well down there, I reckon. Now, every team has had a win, but there is still an undefeated team, which is North Warrnambool. Percentage of 159 for what it's worth. So also not
Okay.
enormous,
So, yeah.
but yes, haven't been defeated yet. Um, but specifically, what caught my eye was a couple of really interesting wins. Um, there was one very close game. Koroit defeated Camperdown by 3 points. That was 8-12-60 to 8-9-57. And that was noteworthy for a four-goal last quarter by Camperdown. Um, that was looking like they were really getting the job done there in the last quarter, but it wasn't quite enough. Koroit still managed 2 goals and they hung on for the 3 point win. So those two teams were equal with 3 wins going into that game. Koroit now jump up to sixth. So I reckon that league is also pretty impressive when you consider the other real standout result from this round of footy, which was Port Fairy. Um, defeated the double reigning premiers South Warrnambool on the weekend by a very, very handy 38 points. That was 13-11, 89 to 7-9, 57. Pete, this game was seventh versus second on the ladder. That is Port Fairy seventh,
Hmm.
defeated second placed South Warrnambool by 38 points. Um, Been a very good turnaround season from Port Fairy, really highlighted by this win because they finished third bottom on the ladder last year. Really good resurgence, I reckon, by them. So that takes them, that keeps them at seventh, just because of other results. But still, very impressive. They've got a percentage of 80, no, sorry, I've lost the number there, 85, nearly 86, and South Warrnambool a percentage of 134. So that's a huge win for
Mm.
Port Fairy to get the chocolates there over South Warrnambool. I think that's a pretty competitive league. We've seen Portland Tigers, note of great note, having a much stronger season this year,
Yep.
currently sitting in third place with 6 wins at the moment after I think perhaps not winning a game last year. Might have that wrong, but they were pretty low down on the
Yeah.
ladder anyway. Uh,
No, they did. They broke the duck this season. We broke that story here. Well,
yeah.
maybe did we probably didn't break the story. There were probably a few that knew it before we
Oh,
did,
let's take the credit.
given that the game was played and we spoke about it like 2 days later. But we mentioned that here. I think that was the story where the president was worried around playing the song, and I think one of the volunteers had mentioned that they'd given it a hearty crack the night before to make sure that it
Yeah.
worked, and I think they played it twice after the win on the Saturday. So good to see Portland still going well. Correct me if I'm wrong here, Rob. Definitely could be wrong. I've been known to be wrong once or twice before. But Port Fairy, Gary Rowan, I believe, playing there
I
at
think
Port
that's
Fairy.
right. I think that's right. Yep.
And
Yep.
obviously, given a really impressive result there against South Warrnambool, he's obviously delivering the goods there for Port Fairy Seagulls. Again,
Yep.
just another a bird just to continue with the theme of this episode. But no, that's really really good. And you're right. It's from in terms of competitiveness, the Hampton League has been another league that's been really really strong in that area,
Yeah, definitely.
with a lots of different results throwing themselves up, and teams like you said, like Portland, being able to go from nothing last season to having 6 wins on the board, sitting third.
Yeah.
Um, we don't always need, like, you're not always going to be able to generate a season where every team is a chance to win it. But I think the leagues that I really like looking at are the ones where you feel like any given year a team could make a jump and have a crack at winning it,
Yeah.
not feeling like it's the same three or four teams year in, year out that are the only ones that have a chance and everyone else is just making up the numbers for Indigo Football League. But yeah, so that's good to see there for Hampton.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I was wondering, Pete, your last what caught your eye? A bit of a long one, perhaps. Should I knock over my last one here and then we get on to yours? Because I think mine will be a bit of a segue.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good call, and because I'm really intrigued to get your thoughts on what's caught my eye in my last piece. So maybe
Yeah.
we'll throw back to you, and then we can work through mine.
Yep. So as a segue, we're going to have a little chat here about Geelong Footy League or Geelong Region football in general. And thanks to Clay for giving us this tip. We should have had this probably locked in our calendars,
We should
Pete,
have.
given how much we talked about
Yeah.
the struggles at Lara and North Shore respectively, combinedly. Down there, that's not even a word, but anyway, um, the struggles of North Shore and Lara in the Geelong Football League. Both teams are still winless, Pete. We covered them and the absolute shambles that was the state of the margins that
Mm.
they have been involved in down there. Uh, it's a real toss-up to wonder who might finish on the bottom of the ladder there. North Shore's got a percentage of 7. They're occupying the wooden spoon spot currently. Lara have a percentage of 11, sitting at the lofty height of second bottom. Um, this week, Pete, they're playing each other. And I have to say, if I wasn't locked in to being at the Uni Blacks footy, I would be a little bit tempted to head down the Geelong Road and get to Lara, watch Majak Daw strap on the boots for Lara. I hope he's still going okay. Um, I don't know really what state that is going to be in. Like, are fans going to be up and about? Is everyone in Lara going to get to the ground? Because this might be their only chance of a win this year. What's the North Shore contingent going to be like driving up the road, heading up north to Lara? I'd love to know. I'm pretty excited to see what the result's going to be. I I really can't pick it based on a percentage of 11 versus a percentage of 7. Um, this could be a clash for the ages. But really, like, I'm taking the piss slightly, but it's a bit sad
Mm.
that we're talking in those terms about two of the oldest clubs in Australia
Yep.
battling it out there, so to speak, at the bottom of the ladder. And I hope that it's a good game of footy, and I hope that whichever team wins does it in the right spirit and
Mm.
that they get around each other. In the sense of talking about the struggles of the Geelong region, Pete, in terms of footy, I think that might be where you're throwing to next, yeah?
Yeah, well, I was going to ask you for a tip first, but you've just said that you can't knowingly make a tip off 11 and 7% and feel good about it. But I'm I'm going to go rogue and make a tip
Yeah.
off the basis of absolutely nothing, and I don't actually think they'll win. But I'm going to go North Shore. Um, North Shore look weaker than Lara, and I always go an underdog, so I'm going to get on North Shore. Does slightly concern me that their highest score this season's 28.
Mm.
Um, but hey, Lara's highest score is 57, so it's not like they're battling too much there. So um,
All right. Well, I'll bet you a pint then. I'm picking Lara.
okay, that there we go. We've got to have something riding on this.
Gamble responsibly.
Um,
What's it
exactly.
really costing you?
And whilst I was looking, I was just having a quick look at Play HQ there to try and justify my selection of North Shore, which I can tell you I wasn't able to do. But wh- whilst I was looking at Play HQ, I also had a sneaky little look at the Ballerine League.
Yeah.
And Rob, I have now found a league where everyone has had a loss and everyone was had a win.
Oh,
The
well
ba-
done.
the Ballerine League, Geelong Amateur are on top, 9 wins, 1 loss, 151%. So
Yep.
not bad. Um, Ocean Grove on the bottom, 1 win, 9 losses, 49%. But everyone has had a win.
Yep.
Everyone has had a loss. So I'm going to claim that as the first league that's done it. Could very much be wrong there, but I'll have to go through a few more leagues. But well done to the Ballerine League. But you are right that really does bring it to one of the things that I wanted to talk about because it caught my eye. I know, Rob, we've had a little bit of a discussion in previous episodes around sort of the state of some leagues in terms of some of that competitiveness, just some of that population. Like, do they have enough
Mm.
people to actually pull together a team to be sustainable for the future? And we've seen, teams folding,
Mm.
Maryborough, um, and certainly we've also seen, as we mentioned earlier, we've seen associations, merge,
Yeah.
fold, the clubs move out. So seeing a lot of shifting. And one of the things that caught my eye the other day was the Northern Futures Project. So this was a project which was formed to propose a sustainable path forward for football and netball competitions in the Central Rivers region into the future. So, um, the Central Rivers is think your Golden Rivers Footy League and your Central Murray Footy League. That is the area there we are looking at. Um, and it was really, really interesting. So they've released the report. The report's been released,
Mhm.
at least the review, not necessarily the full report. I wasn't able to find a full report, but that is online at AFL Victoria. We'd probably do something fancy and put a link somewhere if people want to read that. But the there were a number of themes. I just want to go through it a little bit and then ask for your opinion. But there are a couple of themes or high level themes that came out of it, which was one, the Golden Rivers Football Netball League is unsustainable with less than 6 clubs.
Mm.
So they're saying there that that is a league that's unsustainable with less than six. And as that league sits currently, they have six, noting that at the current stage, Ultima, who do sit second on the ladder in that league, are keen to move into the Central Murray League, which would
Okay.
leave the Golden Rivers League with five, which
Yeah.
the theme of this report says that they believe that is unsustainable.
Yeah.
Um, and or if any club is unable to field one or more teams. So it
Mm.
also becomes unsustainable if you can pull together a seniors team, but you can't have a reserves
Mm.
18s of your juniors as well. And also considering netball within this as well. I don't want to, forget that that would also be applying there to the netballers.
Mm.
And then, moreover, the report found that the number of clubs in the Central Rivers region, so the overall overarching region of AFL Vic, their Central Rivers, is unsustainable. So they're obviously feeling like they have maybe a few too many clubs in the league, and that they don't necessarily have that population to be able to sustain it. So those were two of the sort of high level themes. There are a few other things that are mentioned in it, but those were the two that really I picked out as being sort of the main elements. Is the Golden Rivers Footy League is unsustainable with less than six, or if clubs can't field one or more teams, and that the overall region just has an oversupply of football netball clubs for the amount of people. So then they looked at recommendations. And I just want to go through, there's eight, and I would just want to go through these, and then we can maybe talk through this a little bit more and maybe talk to some of the recommendations and what this might mean for that area. But recommendation one is that the 2025 be the final season of the Golden Rivers Football Netball League. So Recommendation one is that this season is their final season
Mm.
and they play their finals campaign and then they wind up operations.
Mm-hmm.
Off the back of that, they then believe that those clubs need to individually consider either transferring to a league either within or outside of the Central Rivers region where they can compete sustainably. That clubs explore amalgamation opportunities. That the Central Murray Football Netball League expand by accepting club transfers, which can add value to the league. And I think that one's always a real interesting one because oftentimes we
Mm.
see this falls at the hurdle of the league actually taking on board these clubs. I know there was a lot of issues in Gippsland when they were merging leagues, and the like
Mm.
of that is the existing leagues actually blocking these clubs from coming over. That the region considers all transfer and amalgamation propositions individually, whilst recognising that a collaborative approach with neighbouring leagues is necessary. So,
Mm.
again, another one just sort of warning other leagues around the need for them to understand that this is bigger than just your club. This is bigger than just your results and success on the field, that this speaks to a region approach, that the operational and functional model of an expanded league should not be an obstacle to immediate decision making. So, a really interesting element here, which is basically saying, don't worry about how many home and away games are going to be in the fixture. Don't worry about, what the format of the finals are going to be. Don't get stuck in the weeds when we can't even get you to agree on the initial concept, which I thought was a really interesting element to add into the recommendations. The final two,
The get on with it clause, isn't it?
a little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
Or, don't continue to pull up barriers around, oh, yeah, but we haven't thought about how many home and away games that'll be. And,
Mm.
don't continue to try and put roadblocks in the way. The
Mm.
last two, relevant regional league boards should collaborate with AFL Central Victoria to ensure any proposed regional restructure be considered sustainable, viable, and within regulatory limits. And finally, and this one is an interesting one as the final recommendation, should no acceptable 2026 model be achieved, that the Golden Rivers Football Netball League continue with a minimum of 4 clubs for 2026 only as a transitional arrangement. So that's the report that's been released. It's been developed by a steering committee that had been put together by the Central Rivers region. Um, big, I can only imagine it's a big piece of work. There's a lot of stakeholder consultation that would go into this with clubs, with AFL Victoria. Um, some of the I didn't go through all the report, and I encourage people to do go check out the report because it is interesting reading. Some of the fears that clubs have around declining player rate, declining volunteer rate, the ability to remain sustainable is clearly at the heart of all of this.
Mm.
Um, I think, unfortunately, as we have seen, it's not always just as easy, though, to go, we're struggling. How can we do things differently? How can we work together for the greater good of football in Victoria? So I think it's a really interesting point in time. I did read an article, a follow up article off the back of this report being released, where the president of the Murrabit Football Club, who are in this league, just sort of saying that he's just had a number of restless nights with very little sleep,
Mhm.
um, understanding that the future of his club, you know, could be in jeopardy pending which way this goes and where
Yeah.
things land. So really interested in your take, Rob. I know now it wasn't this league you mentioned but it was another league up this way, I believe, that you were looking at across like Deniliquin and things like that. Correct me if I'm wrong when it came to some of this, or was it this league you were looking at? But yeah, just in
Yeah.
general, your thoughts around this.
Yeah, it was this league, Pete. Yeah,
It
we looked
was.
at this Northern Rivers project a few weeks ago, and I was looking at the distances between some of these
That's
places,
right.
and just considering some of the distances between teams that are in New South Wales,
Mm,
uh, like Balranald, and teams that are in Victoria. Um, I'm just having a little bit of a look here. So, 11 teams currently in the Central Murray Football League, and six in the Central Golden Rivers, six in the Golden Rivers.
yep.
Quite confusing because there's a Central Murray, there's a Golden
Murray.
Rivers, and then there's an overarching Central Rivers
Yep.
board. So
Plus, plus you add into that though that you've also got the Murray Football Netball League, and
yeah,
there's
there's a lot of
there's
rivers and a lot of Murrays.
there's a lot of Murrays. Yeah. Yeah. Correct.
It's all happening. No, look, I feel like we're kind of you don't get to watch clubs uh fighting for their lives. I guess I don't want to make it too dramatic, but like we don't really get to see this slow decline playing out on such a large scale very
Mm,
often. As you said, we talked a bit about clubs that have gone under, gone into recess, taken a break, tried to come back. Um, and we see that happen with individual clubs, but we're talking about a whole league in jeopardy here. So it's interesting to me that there are 17 teams across these two leagues. From what I remember of my little look at the distances last time, there wouldn't be a huge amount of extra distance to travel for many of these clubs on most weekends if they were merged into one.
mm.
Sounds to me like that's not really immediately on the cards. It's not really something that is in the proposals there. Um, the proposal recommendations, to be honest, seem pretty wishy-washy to me. They they seem very much like you should go away and think about this and see if you can work it out. It seems a little bit to me like the primary school teacher saying to the kids who are being picked on in the playground. You should just sit down and try and see if you can come to an arrangement. And if you can't come to, like, you must come to an arrangement, but if you can't, then, then maybe we can still have a four-team league. I think that's crap. I don't think they should be looking at a four-team league next year. That's not healthy or sustainable for the
No.
Golden Rivers League to drop to four teams when there is an option to have a much larger league that gives more people a chance to play competitive football. I really worry about how things will end up in the Golden Rivers League if they drop down to four teams. So what triggered my looking at this last time was Ultima, who had
Yes.
tried to request to join the Central Murray League already,
Mm,
having won the premiership last year in the Golden Rivers League over Hay. And I've got the numbers up here again, Pete. So Hay are on top of the ladder undefeated with a percentage of 215.
yep.
Ultima are second with five wins, percentage of 154. Third place, Wandella, four wins, but a percentage of 84. So huge gap there between the top two sides. Now, if that league goes down to four teams, it can't be healthy. There's clearly a gap there to between the top and bottom sides. Maybe there's some somewhat competitive matches happening at the bottom of a bottom four of that
Mm,
league, but it doesn't seem healthy to me. We've mentioned a few times on this pod that we should be seeing perhaps a bit stronger leadership from AFL Victoria or AFL Central Victoria, and that's where I would stand on this. I think the recommendations start out, fairly strongly. Okay, this is the last season of the Golden Rivers League.
yep.
Clubs should do their best to merge, but for me, the last point in there should be um, if no solution is found in the next X number of months between clubs, then AFL Victoria will step in to merge these two leagues. Um, and I think that should be the transition point for 2026, not a cobbled together four-team league in the Golden River Zone League. That would be my take on it.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I don't know enough about it, but I wonder whether I d- I'm making the assumption that these football competitions associations are incorporated associations. And I'm wondering if that's the challenge that AFL Vic have, is that legally at the end of the day, they aren't able to come in and say, well, this is happening regardless of whether you like it
Mm.
or not. I know from my experience in the sports industry, working for Tennis Victoria, there's some times where, yeah, we've wanted to make some decisions, and
Mm.
legally we can't as that overarching body, because these are incorporated associations and they ultimately get to make a decision that they
Mm.
want to make. I'm not speaking with any confidence here on that as to whether that's maybe one of the issues AFL Vic have, is that they actually can't come in and do
Yeah.
that. But I agree with you on the concept that I think they should, like they really should, and they really need to be trying to do that across the board. Um, I think for me, one of the things the report really lacked was an ability to visualize the issue that is being felt. And I think sometimes the best way to visualize some of this impact is through data and insight. And look, obviously, the report has obviously done an extensive amount of interviews and surveys with people in and clubs in this region. But as an example, I've just had a look, and look, this isn't 100% accurate because, as you mentioned, these leagues are expansive. They cover a lot of different areas, but the Gannawarra Shire is one of the shires that Murrabit is in. And I'm looking at the Gannawarra Shire, which includes places like Kerrang,
Mm.
as well. So you can also understand that Kerrang probably has a fair portion of this, but the population in 2021 in Gannawarra Shire was 10,610. The prediction of what it will be in 2036 is 10,180. So they're
Mm.
actually losing close to 500 people in the next 10 years. It's not a growing area. There's not people
Mm.
moving there, and it's not building and growing. And I would have loved to have seen some of that weaved into this around, like, this isn't a case of, for some of these clubs, it's not a case of, oh, you just need to run your show better, or you just need to be able to
Mm.
do this better. Like, for some of these clubs, it's just a matter of they just don't have the people
Mm.
to be able to generate what needs to be, a sustainable, club and a sustainable operation. And so for me, I would have liked to have seen the report visualize some of that a bit more,
Mm.
because I think that goes a long way to selling the story ultimately to the clubs in the Central Murray League, which is logically the league they're going to have to go to. I can't see unless you're aware of one, I can't logically see another league around that area that's logical to go play at. Um, and so for me, it's a one in all in competition. I did note there wasn't a big preference off the back of the report that was done and the stakeholder consultation that was done for a two league tiered system, where it's sort of a premier and a B, an A and a B grade. There wasn't really the preference for that, which I thought was interesting. Because to me, that then also starts to throw in things like promotion and relegation, and really starts to, I think, set a little bit of a culture around some of that, instead of just having dead matches at the end of the season that mean very, very little. Um,
Mm.
but yeah, that's I think you've got some really good takes on that, and yeah, I think we've often spoken around wanting maybe AFL Vic to have a little bit more strength there. But yeah, maybe they can't. I don't know. We might have to look into that and see what they can and can't do in on this front.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, you say it's hard to know what other leagues they could join. So, looking at the Ultimate application, I remember also seeing that Kahuna had already twice applied to join the Heathcote District Football Netball League. Now, Heathcote's a reasonable distance south,
Yeah.
but it does include Lockington,
Hmm.
not that far away. Um, it includes Elmore,
Yep.
further south as you're getting down towards Heathcote. And it does include Leachfield Gunbower, which is very close to Kahuna.
Yep.
So there are a few leagues around. It's interesting to me that Kahuna wouldn't apply to join the Loddon Valley League, which so Pyramid Hill's not very far away from Kahuna, as an
Yeah.
example. Um, and Kerrang, is Kerrang in the Loddon Valley League? Um,
No, Kerrang are in North Central, aren't they?
North Central, right. Well,
Yeah.
Kerrang's very close to Kahuna, and Murrabit. So I don't know. There's arguments there. I think that there are other leagues, and it does sound to me from Kahuna's application to join the Heathcote League, which from what I remember was rejected by the Central Murray League, not by the Heathcote League. Um, so I think there are some clubs that are looking at these kind of moves. But but I agree that it does seem like the Golden Rivers Central Murray League are a package that may work reasonably well together.
Mm.
Um, and I would like to think, for the sake of stability within the other leagues around and continuity between the current Central Rivers region, that a merger of those two leagues, maybe incorporating the amalgamation of a couple of clubs, you
Yep.
might end up then with, let's say, 12, 14 clubs, something like that, in an amalgamated Central Rivers League, as opposed to 17 clubs distributed very unevenly across the two. But
Yeah.
be very interesting to follow this and see where it ends up, Pete.
Agreed. Yeah. One we might need to keep an eye on as it continues to progress.
Yeah, for sure. All right. No, thanks for that. Good summary. Let's keep an eye on it. Let's keep an eye on that along with all of the other little bits and bobs that we have a look at. Um, we're going to jump perhaps to our paddock to premiership, I reckon. We're getting towards time to wrap this one up. I am interested to hear how your paddock to premiership picks went. We've had our eye a little bit, both of us personally, on Castlemaine. Any joy? You want to start us off?
Yeah, no joy at all. Not going to be a joyful paddock to premiership for the Castlemaine Football Netball Club. They played Sandhurst. They were beaten by 109 points.
Mm.
Enough said, really. But what I would say, if I was to give any summary, I'm not really going to do a summary of this one, but I'll just leave it on what was shaping early days as a promising season is now dead and buried, gone. I think that's 2025 done for Castlemaine.
Well, that's pretty grim, but I cannot disagree. Uh, all right, Pete. If you want to talk about seasons that are dead and buried,
Mm,
I can match you in terms of disappointment, in terms of well, no, let's be honest. Actually, more disappointment because they've won less games than Castlemaine. Fitzroy lost to Old Geelong by 24 points. Now, Old Geelong have been good. Losing by 24 points to Old Geelong is not a disgrace at all. Uh, it was a pretty low scoring classic wet Vaffa game at Como Park in South Yarra. So look, fair shakes to Fitzroy for getting close in that one, but getting close is not good enough, Pete. Um, I've written here season over Arrow C grade. So their previous nearest rival for second uh, for the second relegation spot in C grade. Oh, I'm already saying they're in C grade. I've already demoted them. Um, their nearest rival for relegation to C grade was Old Melbournians, who won on the weekend. So it's now a three-game gap between Fitzroy and their nearest relegation rival, which incidentally is actually now Old Camberwell, given their recent form slump. So look, I've got I've got the lid on the casket, Pete. I've I've almost got the last screw in the coffin of Fitzroy. I'm giving them one last chance to knock
Oh,
on the underside of the casket.
oh
And and
goodness.
and that and that knock, if we're going to stretch the analogy, that knock is going to have to come against Old Melburnians. So Fitzroy do have a chance, Pete, to pull one game back, and it's going to have to be now because there are teams at the top of B grade that are really flying, and I don't think Fitzroy are going to beat them. So they have to beat Old Melburnians this week. Um, and I'll be putting the final nail in the coffin next week if the Roys don't get up over OMs. So watch this space.
Yeah, that's like the reverse lids off when you think it's premiership time. That's
Yeah,
lids nearly on the casket. So,
yeah.
um, is there is there a sneaky chance? Is there a sneaky chance they get over Old Camberwell? Old Camberwell have been struggling in the last few weeks. I don't know what's been happening there, but
Mhm.
their results from the start of the year compared to now are very different.
Yeah,
Fitzroy probably still, well, not probably, they need to go in and at least win those two against Old Melburnians. They need to
yeah.
take OM's two zip. I don't know. Look, I think yeah. I'm maybe like you. I'm giving them one last chance to knock on the top of the casket lid and say, "Hey, I'm still alive in here," but it's not looking great.
Well,
Um,
Old Camberwell play Hampton Rovers this weekend, so Hampton are winless.
all
So
right, nail them in, I reckon.
well, well, as I said, I'm not looking at Old Camberwell at this stage, really. I am thinking that Fitzroy have got to show life. Actually, to be honest, it doesn't matter what Old Camberwell do. Fitzroy just have to win. They got to
Well,
start
that's a
winning.
really good point. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. You can't be worried about what other teams are doing on the ladder if you can't get the wins yourself.
Mm. It will
Um,
get to a point where they need other results to go their way, but they've got to start taking control of their own destiny. Anyway, enough on Fitzroy.
yeah, no, we could do a whole episode on Fitzroy and what's happened to them this season. Over to the Ovens and Murray again, Rob. So North Albury, the Hoppers win by 9 points. They reversed a 9 point deficit going into the last quarter. The Joshua twins in Josh Murphy and Josh Minogue.
Joshua
Um,
Tim.
yeah, Joshua Tin, yep. Um, so Josh Murphy kicked four off the back of having 11 last week.
Oh, geez,
He
he's had
had
a
a
week
big
off.
one. He had a big one, and Josh Minogue kicked three. Um, 7 of the 10 goals for the team they kicked between them. So they are very, very handy, and that puts them second on the ladder, behind Wang Rovers. But yeah, there's still a lot of football left in that Ovens and Murray League, and there are a lot of teams that, as we saw with Albury Tigers beating Wang Magpies, that can cause an upset. So not a league where you can foot off the gas at any point. I think they're going to have
Hmm.
to stay up there. But at this point in time, the Hoppers are looking like they're getting the job done. I would like to see a strong performance against one of the Wangaratta teams to just really give me a little bit of confidence. At the minute, it feels like they might be the third best team in the comp, but yeah, that's just because I don't have confidence based off previous results against the two Wangaratta teams.
Yep, fair enough. Good summary there. I bet the Joshes did have a couple of tens after kicking seven out of the last 10 goals, but I'd love to know what it's like kicking 4 goals in a game after having kicked 11 the week before. Is that a disappointment? Do you feel like you've let the side down? Probably not when you've had a win, but do you feel a bit deflated?
I mean, you're asking the wrong person. I played centre half back or back flank pretty much my or full back my whole life. So the days of me kicking a goal was incredible and exhilarating and not at all deflating. Kicking four, if I kicked four, I'd probably be doing laps of the oval. In all honesty, so probably the wrong person to ask. We probably need to ask someone that kicks back the goals as to whether four off the back of 11 is disappointing. I think four based off the opposition is still probably a really handy sort of day out. But I don't know.
Fair enough.
We'll have to ask a big kicking forward.
If you know a big kicking forward who wants to tell us about how it's what it's like to kick 11, let us know. All right, onwards. Unfortunately, not upwards. Karingal, 52 point defeat at the hands of Rye. He says with a wry smile. Rye were two spots above Karingal on the ladder, so this was one of their closer chances for a win. Uh, Not going great there at Karingal, but I would shout out Connor Byrne, who kicked 3 goals. I think that's the highest number of goals someone has kicked for Karingal so far this year in one game. Well done to him.
Yeah.
Crib Point up next for Karingal and Crib Point mid-table. So
Okay. So
tough
probably
going for the Bulls.
probably a little more pain coming for the Bulls.
Mm.
Finally, Buck Manangatang for me, an 87-point win over Balranald. Believe it or not, they were 3 points down at quarter time. So,
Oh,
quite a big shift there in the last three quarters when they got on top. 7 goals to Isaac Franks for Buck, and that's shot him up the goal kicking leaderboard there. I reckon that puts him maybe just a few behind the leading goal kicker. And out of interest, when looking at the match, Rourke Smith was playing for Balranald, so ex Western Bulldogs player. Not that you really know it from how he played for us at the Dogs, but it wasn't my favourite player. But he's out there running around for Balranald, which is great to see. But it's currently not helping Balranald. They're sitting second bottom. Buck sitting mid-table. Again, with the amount of teams in that league, it's hard to know whether they're giving themselves a shout of playing finals or if this is just getting some wins on the board before they start tumbling down. But we'll have to wait and see how the rest of their results go for the remaining weeks.
yep, very good. All right. It just occurs to me that while I shouted out Karingal in the Mornington Peninsula Div 3, I forgot to tell you that I'd found Mornington Peninsula Div 1 is another league where every team has either won or lost, has both won and lost.
Well done.
So
There's
there we
another
go.
one.
There we go. We can come back to them later. I should have noted that earlier when I was looking at that draw between. So that league features every team with a win and a loss, and that league has a draw. So I think it's winning.
Yeah, I think that's probably on top.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive.
All right, my last one, Pete. You had very strong win there for Buck Manangatang, and I have a very strong win for Pyramid Hill over Newbridge by 113 points. Absolutely underscored by a 10-goal second quarter blitz. Benjamin Bissett kicked 8 goals. He's doing very well there.
Benjamin Button.
No, Benjamin Bissett was on the button again. Uh, Benjamin Bissett kicking behinds and also goals. All right, enough of that. We're getting silly. It's too late on a Sunday evening. But Pete, before we get too silly, big weekend coming up. So we have a huge clash in the Loddon Valley League to keep an eye on this coming weekend with Pyramid Hill against Morong. Morong remain undefeated in that league, having a great season, but geez, Pyramid Hill's form has been good in the
Mm.
last few weeks. So I reckon that game will be very close. So we're going to keep an eye on that one. We're going
Yep.
to keep an eye on Lara versus North Shore for top of the table and bottom of the table clashes in different leagues. And I'm sure there's plenty of other good footy to keep our eye on. But those are two games I'll be very interested in particular. And
Yeah,
Fitzroy and OMs.
I was just about to say Fitzroy and OMs, I reckon, is the another one that we'll have an eye on because I just, yeah,
Yeah,
if they're ever gonna do the waking from the dead,
yeah,
um,
got to start now.
that's the game. So
Yeah. So there we go, folks. That's a wrap. Thanks for joining us for another week of local footy. We hope that your team is doing better than Coringle and maybe just as well as Pyramid Hill, knocking on the door there of a top spot. Yeah, we hope your teams are getting the 4 points. Have a great weekend and a great week to come. And we look forward to joining you with more local footy highlights next week.